Hi, I'm Shannon Grissom. Are you looking to ignite your creativity? Or how about be inspired by a steady stream of muses? Welcome to Painterly Life, the podcast that celebrates those who create, inspire, and innovate. So, whether you're looking to spark your next big idea, reignite your passion, or simply soak in some creative energy, this is the place for you. Painterly Life, where every guest is a new muse just for you. Welcome to Painterly Life. I'm your host, Shannon Grissom. Today's guest is Teresa J. Sharp. Teresa combines her culinary, family life, and hospitality background into her art. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Okay, rather than just diving straight into the art, I would really love to talk about your sourdough. It's a beautiful sculptural creation, and dang, isn't it yummy? So, how did you get started doing that?
Well, I have a long legacy of baking. I loved baking, but I didn't really do it sourdough. And then, the craze started with the COVID shutdowns, and my daughter got into it, which is funny because she wasn't a baker, but she got really into sourdough. And then the first time she was able to come visit, she brought some starters, like, Mom, you've got to try this. And she showed me how she did it, which was fun, a big role reversal, instead of me teaching her to bake, she's teaching me. And it was just a fun little tradition that I picked up.
So, how has your family life, your baking love of entertaining influenced your art?
Well, it's all interconnected, I think, like it is for most people. Our stories are just a tangled mess, a beautiful tapestry, as we like to call it, of different twists and turns. And when I got married, my biggest dream was to be a homemaker. I really didn't have career aspirations. I had the latent art interest, but I didn't think that I could do anything practical with that. So I just threw myself into homemaking. And that really was a creative outlet in my 20s and 40s. It brought a lot of joy, just providing home as a haven, preparing, organizing, planning, decorating, and then keeping it going so that my husband and my children had a place to launch from. And I really didn't feel deprived. I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. I did that as creatively as I could. And that kind of expanded into inviting family, friends, neighbors over for meals, and everything from a casual takeout pizza and brownie box to a 7-course New Year's Eve dinner. I liked everything in between. So it kept my creative juices alive and was a genuine expression of wanting to sort of add to the beauty of the world and engage with others in that.
And while you're still doing that now on top of your art, can you tell me a little bit about your involvement in the hospitality industry and how that has influenced your art?
Yes. I've always enjoyed having people over, hosting them, especially overnight guests. But we actually lived in Japan for 4 years. And while we were there, we ended up having a lot of visitors that were more extended, relatives of relatives that I didn't know yet, or friends of friends that I didn't know yet. And we just got more comfortable having people in our home and sharing what we loved about where we were living, taking them sightseeing to our favorite restaurants and that sort of thing. And then as we were thinking about what life would be like when we came back to the States, we came up with this idea. That was just when the short-term vacation rental boom kind of started. And my husband is an early adopter on a lot of these sorts of things. So he was like, let's consider doing this. Let's find a place to live instead of going back to the Bay Area and getting maybe stuck in a home that with a huge mortgage. Let's try to find a place to live that costs a little less and has space, room to do vacation rental, short-term vacation rental. So 8 years ago, we did that. And I help manage those vacation rentals. We have the one we live in and one in Oakhurst, and then one in Mariposa, and now one in San Antonio, Texas. And my husband does the bulk of the work because I got too busy with that. And although it was fun, especially the setup, that was the creative fun part. Decorating, going with the theme, setting up the functional aspect, being organized, having my checklist. I loved all of that. Then when we got in the day-to-day managing, setting up the cleaners and that sort of thing, it started to take away from my true passion, which was the art and painting. So he's taken on the bulk of that now, and I'm still helping, but I don't do as much with it. I still enjoy rearranging the art in those spaces and sharing what we're doing with them with others. I engage with the guests a little bit, especially at our own home. But it again was another fun way of using my desire to create a haven, a place for people to launch for their adventures, as they travel.
I love that you too were influenced by the artist way. I read the book when I was in my 30s, and to this day, many, many years later, I am still doing morning pages every day, and they still serve me well. I continue to get inspired by them. So with you took classes, you did the artist way exercises, and then you went to Toulouse, France. So tell me about that.
Well, I always enjoyed art as a child, and I fell in love with oil painting in high school. But then when I got married and focused on homemaking, I put all that aside, didn't have the room to leave the messy stuff out. And I dabbled in art classes every now and then when I homeschooled my daughter. It was a great excuse. It's like, oh, this is part of her education. And I'd sit in, and that's when I started doing watercolor. But again, it was very sporadic. I didn't prioritize it. It was low on the list, but it was always there. And if I go on vacation, I might take my paints and do a little bit. But when I was turning 50, I was 49 and looking ahead to my 50th year, I had noticed a couple of other friends had made some major life changes right around 50. They had personal challenges or started new things, and I was going through a hard time, struggling with some depression, was a bit overwhelmed. I had been involved in some women's ministry and volunteer work, which I loved. It was very rewarding, but I just had reached the end of a chapter and felt like something had to change. I needed to take better care of myself. I needed to focus on something that didn't involve the children. My youngest was a teenager and was kind of giving me the, okay, mom, you're done signals. And so I'm like, I've got to get my own life now. And I started reading The Artist's Way. And honestly, the first time I read it through, I'm like, no, this isn't me. And total denial. And the second time I read it through, I'm like, give it a chance. Maybe there's something there. Do some of the exercises. So I did start doing the morning pages. I actually got involved in a writer's group. It's like I just needed a creative outlet. And the combination of the writer's group, The Artist's Way, and then a serendipitous meeting with a few other professional artists who encouraged me. I just decided to make that year, the year I turned 50, a year of transition and sort of a trial period. It's like, I'm going to quit everything that adds stress to my life, continue loving God and loving others, continue the basics of being a human, but I wanted to see if there was really something to my art that needed to be nurtured and could grow. So I started thinking what I really would like to do is go away for a while on my own, be brave. My husband is a world traveler and traveled a lot with work, and I got to piggyback on that, but he always took care of everything. And I was like, you know what? I'm a grown up. I ought to be able to travel on my own. So it was a reward for turning 50, for staying alive, and a challenge to step up and be brave. And so I found this art retreat in Toulouse, France, and it was scary on so many levels, just allowing myself, it seems so decadent, like to invest in myself, to say, it's okay to spend the time and money and effort to focus on something I might just enjoy. It may be nothing more than enjoyment. And it was a huge spiritual, emotional hurdle, honestly, to overcome. But my husband was super supportive, and I made the plans. It was in October. I started this plan in November, December, and it wasn't until October. So then I spent those next months preparing for that. I joined a senior center class with watercolor, took a couple of private lessons with watercolor, and then by the time October came, I was ready to jump in, and it was an amazing experience. And it was scary, and I made lots of mistakes that I could laugh about, like packing too much luggage and not getting accurate directions, wandering the streets lost in Toulouse with giant luggage, the embarrassing, ugly American. But it was fun. It was wonderful. And it really did help it kickstart my, like, this is real. I'm really becoming an artist.
Well, you've had a lot of travel. I love your geishas and your koi paintings. Can you tell me about your time in Japan?
And that was also sort of a follow-up to this whole artist way, honoring the passion that's in me. After getting back from Toulouse and continuing with the senior center and then meeting these other professional artists, we actually went through the Artist Way workbook together. And one woman had raised her child as a single mom, as a full-time artist. Her entire adult career was a full-time artist. And that was so inspiring to me. It's like, you can actually make this profitable. You don't have to just be the starving artist who spends all your extra money on your art supplies and consider it a hobby. So that planted a seed of maybe someday I could, increase my skills enough to have a little career out of this in my later years. And they encouraged me to go back to school. When I got frustrated with the level of seriousness or instruction at the senior center, they're like, just go back to school. So I went to a community college in San Jose, Evergreen College, and took a basic drawing class and a basic color class. And oh my gosh, I fell in love. I loved homework assignments. I love instruction. It helped with some of that artist block of what am I going to do? It's like I had a homework assignment. That's what I'm going to do. I had very limited choices, and it really helped. So it got me in the practice of doing that. Then right after that one semester, I only took one semester. Right after that semester was over, my husband got a job opportunity to have a temporary assignment in Yokohama, Japan. And again, it just seemed like the right time in our life. And we sold our home. We put most of our belongings in storage. And it was a 2-year assignment that turned into 4 because we loved it so much. Again, I think just the personal challenge of having to give up what was behind and move forward. And again, I didn't have any responsibilities except to love and support my husband. And the funny thing is, the primary goal he had, other than, go to work and do his job, was to make sure I was happy. And in fact, the funny thing was the company even had that focus. Like, they understood that the spouse of the expat who's doing the job struggles the most because they don't have a job to go to and instant friends and all of that. So they provided all sorts of resources, language classes, private language lessons that turned into a deep friendship. And I started traveling with her. She was very supportive of my art pursuits. I found an English-speaking art teacher at a small school that I could go to as little or as much as I wanted. That became a new community. Everyone was so supportive. It was an amazing experience.
Well, now you've become such a creative powerhouse. Do you ever get stuck? I mean, do you ever just feel resistance? And if so, what do you do to get out of it?
I get stuck a lot. I have a lot of artist friends who are like, "Oh, there's so much stress in my life and in the world. So I just went to my studio and let it all go." And I'm the opposite. If there's stress and anxiety and upheaval in my life, whether it's my emotional life or my relational life or my, physical life, if we're traveling a lot or whatever, I just don't produce much. And then I get out of the routine and then it's hard to get back in. Again, I may have a little ADD issues. It's like I can only focus on one thing at a time. And if I have too many things draining my energy and I'm problem solving in different areas of my life, I can't focus on the art. I think I heard somewhere, an average painting you make 2,000 decisions in an average painting. I'm like, and I am very sensitive to decision-making overload. So I have to be very thoughtful about my time and my use of my time. And one of the biggest helps in my life, I like to read, and I like to read some basic organizational books. But one of my favorite books, besides The Artist's Way, is Atomic Habits. And I realized that, and I reread it almost every year. So I learned some very practical ways of thinking about my life, what my priorities are, what I'm doing, and then protecting my most productive time, especially when I have deadlines. So in a general sense, that's my approach to avoiding being stuck, is just carving out time, looking at my calendar and writing in paint on certain days. Like, I'm going to protect that day. I'm not going to let something else get in. That is my paint day. But in a more, in a more psychological way to get over those blocks and stops, I have to trick myself. I'm very linear and driven and check the list, checks the boxes on the list kind of person, which doesn't really fit with creativity sometimes, because again, I've got this nagging list in my mind. But if I just work with that instead of working against it, knowing myself, it's like, okay, work ahead of time to prepare myself for the days I'm going to paint. So the night before, I need to make as many decisions as I can. Maybe the full day before. So I'm going to look through my reference photos, narrow it down, get a few things printed out, draw a grid on it, choose what size canvas or paper I'm going to use. I make as many preparatory decisions as I can so that the day I'm going to paint, all I have to do is get started. So that's one practical thing. But if I'm really, really stuck, and I have been, with some transitions, like when we first moved here, I was isolated and alone from everyone, and the return from Japan was harder than the going to Japan. I've heard that's a common thing when you're an expat. Returning home is sometimes harder than going. So during that time, what I did is I tried to remove as much pressure as I could from feeling like I have to paint a masterpiece. So the key to that for me was sketchbooks. I got several sketchbooks, and that's how I got started. And that's my tip for people who want to get started. If they haven't done anything with art and they think they can't draw and they think they can't paint, like, get a sketchbook, if you like watercolors, make sure it's got watercolor paper in it, pencil, pen, watercolor, and then just start. And again, know yourself and what works for you. And part of what works for me is a challenge, like a 30-day challenge. I like to do social media, so I make a big deal. I've signed up for a 30-day challenge. I'm going to use someone else's prompts so I don't have to make a decision. And I'm going to do this challenge every day. And I tell the world, starting today, I'm doing a challenge. Here's my first one. And now I have a built-in incentive to do at least something every day. And I give myself lots of leeway. It can be a quarter of a page. Doesn't have to be a full page. Doesn't have to be a full scene. It can be a study. It can be a practice. It could be a thumbnail sketch, honestly. Just something in my sketchbook. And that helps usually get my sort of creative juices flowing again, especially if I've done it for 30 days. Then I have a sense of accomplishment, because a big part of what happens as I sink into my stuckness is the self-doubt. You're not really an artist. You can't really paint. Who do you think you are? You have more important things to do. All that negative self-talk. Well, if I completed even 15 of 30-day challenge, I'm like, I am an artist. See, I can draw a mug with coffee in it. So that's just a couple of my ways of getting out. I will add, though, building relationships with other artists was huge for me. In fact, where I'm at today is directly related to joining some groups. And for us up here, Yosemite Sierra Artist Group, which is a larger group, was the first step and made a big difference. And then you hear about shows and exhibitions, and now there's deadlines. Oh, I need to make sure I have a painting done by this deadline so I can submit it. That's just the way I work. Some people feel pressured by those things, but I work to deadlines. Like I said, all my fellow students, all the youngsters who were in my Evergreen College class, every Friday or Thursday, I would be, what about homework? And the other students are like, no. And I'm like, I wanted homework over the weekend. And they were like, no. So that's just me. I think knowing yourself is the important thing. Just trying to figure out what motivates you, what gives you that extra push. But the relationships do. And then later I joined a smaller group of 9 women who meet regularly about once a month. And we do show and tell. We have challenges. And again, there were several months where I couldn't do anything. Went through a hard time when my mom was in her final months of life. And, it was hard. It was hard to get something done. But being in relationship with other artists who encourage you and celebrate every little effort was really helpful.
Your self-awareness, that's huge, because I know for me, I work with who I am to make my creations. Case in point is that I was always told that I was too sensitive. And over the years, I've learned that is my superpower. So I think the more that you can tune into yourself and use it in your creations, the better. You've definitely got a handle on what works for you and what doesn't. That's just awesome. So what's coming up for you next?
Well, some exciting things are coming up. Because we lived in the Bay Area for 20 years, I have a lot of connections there. Our grown children and grandchildren are still over there, so we travel over there a lot. And toward the end of last year, it really became clear to me that I have a deep desire to connect with the art community, the art admirers and collectors in the Bay Area. So I also realized that the only thing keeping me from doing that was fear of rejection, fear of criticism. Again, fear that I might not even hear it, just thinking that someone might think, who does she think she is? That whole, weird thing that we have. So I decided that I don't want to let the fear of my ego being bruised to be the obstacle that keeps me from new opportunities. It's just pride. And it's silly. It's like, no, there are artists better than me, and there are artists coming up behind me, just beginning. And that's always going to be true. And art is so subjective, and the admiration of art is so relative that I just need to relax and embrace doing what I enjoy, which again, there are so many unspoken or spoken rules, like you say, that artists think they have to follow. And it's good to learn, what do they say? It's good to learn the rules so you can know how to break them, And one of the things that I've always felt kind of bad about is that I love a wide range of styles, mediums, I don't want to just be a one pony. What's the word? I don't want to do just one thing. And I developed an entire theme of work from the theme of the things I loved in Japan, the koi and the geisha. So I've reached out to some connections in the Bay Area, and several things have opened up. That's very exciting. I have one painting in a gallery in Pacific Grove called the 480 Lighthouse Gallery. And I've also entered a contest there where you paint a little square on location, and they're going to have a little contest for that. I did some koi, acrylic koi for that one. And then I did a really fun plein air trip with a friend of mine who is better at plein air than I am. So that's another thing. I love to learn and challenge myself. So plein air does not come natural for me. I'm a very fair weather outdoor person. When it's perfect, I love to be outside. And when it's not, I just want to be home with the air conditioner on or the heater or the whatever. So but my peer group up here, several of them love plein air painting, and I've seen their beautiful work, and I know the principle behind painting from life and learning to paint quickly. So I've challenged myself to learn that, and it has been very uphill battle for me. I have left almost in tears many times thinking, I hate painting. I'm never going to paint again. But I finally decided that I've got to give it a better chance by actually doing it more. And so I went on a little trip to the coast, California coast, with a friend. We did Capitola, Santa Cruz. We did 6 days of painting, painted every day, sometimes twice a day. And it really helped me get over that hurdle. And now I no longer see it as something I hate and avoid. I'm still not at the place of loving it and it being my thing, but I've seen the benefit to my work, and I ended up with pieces that I didn't hate. I still needed to finish them at home. I couldn't just finish in the field, but maybe later. So to that end, or in line with that thinking, I have signed up for the plein air convention in Reno and Tahoe at the end of May, which is, again, a very scary thing, investing a lot of time, a lot of money, and I can get obsessive about, okay, where are we staying? How comfortable am I going to be? How can I get all my supplies out in the field so that I have what I need? I'm a little bogged down with the logistics right now, but I'm excited about it. I think it'll be a growing learning experience. And the biggest thing I'm looking forward to this next year, which is sort of already begun, our daughter and son-in-law live in Corte Madera, which is in Marin County. And I found out that Marin has a open studio every year in May, the first 2 weekends of May, and it's open to everyone. You don't have to live there. I've participated in the Sierra Art Trails up in our area 4 different years, 3 years in a row and 1 before COVID. And that was a great learning experience, made lots of connections. Again, it's a hard deadline to get a lot of work done, get prints and cards made, get things priced. So that has worked well for me. But again, I thought, I wonder what it would be like to be in a different area. So I reached out to Marin Open Studios and asked them about joining. They were very welcoming. I signed up and joined. And then I had to go through the process of trying to find a shared group space so that I can show there, since I don't have a home or studio there to show in. And I actually, again, at every step, there was like another scary thing to go through. It's like, okay, first just seeing if my work was of the quality I would be accepted. Turns out there's no real jury process to getting in. You just pay the money and sign up and you're in. But then once I started looking for locations, I found out that some of the locations that were more desirable are juried locations. And it was tempting to just go with an easy co-op space that wasn't juried, but I instead reminded myself, what do I have to lose? So they could say no for whatever reason. They may have a myriad of reasons that I wouldn't be invited in, but I decided to go for it. And I was shocked and thrilled to find out that I was accepted in, I believe there'll be 15 artists at this location, and there'll be close to 300 artists in the Marin Open Studio. So I'll be showing the first 2 weekends, Saturday and Sunday of May, at the Marin Art and Garden Center, which is a beautiful location. And I've already gone and checked it out, and I'm excited about that. As part of the Marin Open Studios, they're also having some pop-up shows in other locations. And just last week, I dropped off one piece at one of those showcases, and it's at the Marin Community Foundation. It's a beautiful office space. I can't remember how many artists they have in this show. I want to say it's about 100. I could be wrong, but it's all large pieces, and it's a really gorgeous space. And normally the office is not open to the public, but from now until, well, actually from February 13th, from now until the end of May, that will be open. I just have one piece there, but lots of beautiful art for people who are looking to get an idea of what will be available during the Marin Open Studios. They'll also have a preview exhibition in Sausalito, at the Sausalito Center for the Arts, I believe is what it's called. So that's my big exciting thing. I mean, truthfully, there's a lot of exciting things. Our group here, Yosemite Sierra Artists, has found gallery space. I'm hoping to be involved in that. I used to be a member at the Mariposa Sierra Artist Gallery, and I hear a spot is opening up there. I should be getting in sometime in the spring. So I've got about a window of 1 month to get a bunch of paintings done for all these deadlines I've created for myself.
Wow, you're just blooming, blooming, blooming. So our time is coming to a close. What advice would you give someone who has some resistance and needs a little push to get over the bend?
I would say, depending on where you are, if you're a newbie, brand new beginner, I say get a sketchbook, pencil, waterproof ink pen, and an inexpensive set of watercolors, and just start playing. That's number one. Number two, if you already have some experience, but you really want to advance, connect with other artists, find those artist communities, get plugged in. And once you do, you'll find they have so many resources to share. And take classes. There's so much free internet instruction. But again, for me, it worked better to actually fork out a little money and have a time limit, attend a class. I was more likely to show up. If I prepaid for something, I was more likely to show up. It's easy to talk myself out of doing art when it's like, oh, I just want to sketch every day, but I paid the money and I'm going to miss it if I don't show up. Those are the things that helped me, but everybody's different,
Well, thank you, Teresa. You have been an inspiration.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
That's great. I can't say enough about creativity and how it fills your life with joy. So whatever your creative thing is, do it. And then do it some more. I wish you inspired action. Well, that's a wrap. Please visit painterlylife.com, like, subscribe, and share. Don't miss an episode or a new muse just for you. I'll see you next time.